Folks, welcome to another edition of the Buckmaster's Big Buck Blueprint, brought to you by Rack Hub. We've got a young man here from Liberty, Indiana. Codey Red, welcome to our podcast, my friend.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to get into your deer and everything here in a minute because you shot a heck of a buck. But let's talk a little bit about your hunting. How'd you get started? And, you know, you're from Indiana, which, by the way, y'all had a pretty good football team this year, by the way, too, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
you made the
sir.
playoffs and everything. That's cool. All right. But you hunt in
Ohio. So talk to me a little bit about hunting up there in the Midwest and stuff like that, and who got you started.
Yeah, so I've been hunting ever since I could probably walk. My grandfather, he got me into hunting when I was real little, and he grew up doing it and passed that down to me. I mean, he's been with me for all my deer that I've killed up to this point, and he actually passed away. So it's been kind of hard dealing with that, but I'm just fortunate he took me under his wing and guided me in the right direction here. But yeah, I live on a little farm here. I was fortunate enough to purchase off my other grandparents, and it's actually where I grew up at, just a little 30-acre farm. And so I got big plans here this coming year. And actually, I was in the middle of moving while I was hunting the Ohio deer. So, but we still got a lot of stuff to get finished up yet. So.
Well, that's cool. You know, it's interesting you say that because my dad was a big sports person. You know, he didn't hunt or fish, but, you know, I owe all my athletic career to him. But my grandfather's the one that got me hunting and fishing. And I miss him, you know, today. It's been a long time ago when he passed away, but he kind of took me under his arm, and we started squirrel hunting and rabbit hunting and quail hunting and everything. So,
Any particular weapons you like to hunt with? Are you hunting with all of them, and what's the regulations up there in Indiana and Ohio?
Yeah, so I really like to bow hunt. I say that's probably one of my favorites, but I'm not afraid to pick up a gun. That's how I started and grew up, so it's still in me there. But our season here in Indiana starts October 1st and then goes through January. So we got a pretty big archery time frame there, and then we have about 2 weeks of gun season right in the rut there in November. But I'd say bow hunting is probably my favorite to pursue animals with.
So how much do you hunt Indiana compared to Ohio? The season's about the same, or you got one starting before or after?
So Ohio comes in right there before Indiana does. It comes in like the September 30th, I believe, just right there on the tail end of September, and then it actually goes through February. So their bow season is extended longer, and then they only have a week-long gun period, and then for rifles, and then a 2-week gun hunt. They're just on a weekend, and then they have, I'd say, just a couple days of muzzleloader. I've never muzzleloader hunted Ohio, but yeah, so they still have a pretty wide range for a bow and a short range for gun, but I'd say that's probably why they got big deer too.
oh, absolutely. There's no question the pressure, you know, the food sources, and y'all got some great deer up there. There's no question about that. So, which state do you put more of your time in, Indiana or Ohio?
Well, ever since hunting this particular deer, I've put in a lot of time in Ohio. But like I said, I'm only 15 minutes from Ohio, so it's not too far of a drive. I try to put just about as equal amount of time in both states, depending on you know, if I have a deer to hunt or just trying to get out and about. But I'd say this year, I would say I put more time in Indiana, just because playing the wind and making sure everything was correct before I went into my Ohio spot. So I'm fortunate enough to have two spots to hunt. If I'm hunting Ohio, then my wind is wrong for Indiana. But if I can hunt Indiana, then my wind is wrong for Ohio. So I
Okay.
basically just do wherever the wind tells me.
Well, you know, that's what's so cool about doing these podcasts is listen to hunters shoot these big deer. And it'll always come back to wind direction and pressure. on a lot of them. And when you just said wind, bingo, you just hit it again. So if somebody is listening to this podcast, I can't emphasize, and Cody cannot emphasize more, to pay attention to the wind. And in seminars and stuff I've done over the years, what's the number one thing? If you only do one, pay attention to the wind, because you're talking about an animal that has the greatest smell of any big game animal on this
planet. So it's great to hear you say that. Let's talk a little bit about acreage. What size acreage are you hunting in Indiana and this particular deer we're getting ready to talk about in Ohio?
Yep. So my home farm here is only about 30 acres. Most of it is hay ground, and then I got a little bit of woods with a nice creek that runs through it. Kind of CRP, mostly just overground cattle pastures that I'm hunting over. So deer don't particularly stay here. It's more of a travel corridor for them, but it still produces some decent deer here. In Ohio, the farm that I hunt, it's actually my buddy's farm. We work together, and he farms mostly full time on his farm, but that particular farm of his is 80 acres. I'd say about 40 of it is cattle pasture. A little bit is tillable ground, and then a little bit is just woods.
Okay. What kind of crops are you putting in on your Ohio place?
Whatever he puts in. So it's a rotation between corn and soybeans, and then there is a small alfalfa field also that he bales for cattle.
So that's the food source right there that the big whitetails are looking for, depending on what he plants: corn, soybeans, or alfalfa.
Correct. And then there is in that particular woods, there's quite a bit of oaks as well. So that early season, if I can get in there, those oaks are really good food source as well.
So what's your game plan starting, whether it's summertime, all the way preparing to the fall? I assume you use game cameras and stuff like that. So let's set up this deer, but what went behind the scenes with you and your buddy on this particular, what'd you say, 80 acres?
Yeah, so normally, actually, this deer got me into cellular cameras. So I actually didn't have any cameras at all. And I've been hunting this deer for 4 years now.
Wow.
So, yep. And he got me into cellular cameras and just all the research I did. I got some deer under my belt, but nothing this caliber for sure. So trying to get educated on hunting a mature big deer, and the wind was number one, and then intrusion was another one I learned from the great Don Higgins. So I introduced cellular cameras into my tactics and put those out on the farm, and that way I could just stay out of there and let him be. Yeah, so I think I got 2 cameras that first year, and I put back there. So the story on this deer, I heard that there was a big deer at the time in that area, but nobody had really put any cameras out or had him on camera. It was just a visual, what they were going off of. So then the following year, my buddy, he came in to work one day, and he brought these sheds with him that he had found, and it was matching set. He found them out in the hayfield, and I actually got them right here if you would like to.
Let's see those.
So these are his matching sheds. So he would have been 4.5 at the time. I don't know if you guys can see that.
Wow. Yeah, I can.
So he would have been 4.5 at the time those sheds were found. And he was just checking cattle and cruising his hayfield, and they were laying right there by a fence. So he brought those in, and he said, "Is this a good deer?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. That's the biggest deer I've ever seen." So those sheds really got me started into wanting to pursue this animal. So therefore, I bought some cellular cameras, put them out on the farm, and started scouting. Try to do some velvet scouting as well, just taking my binos out in the evening, seeing what I could see. And I actually have never seen him in velvet. So I don't have any pictures of him or nothing in velvet.
Where'd you put your cameras? When you were thinking about it, where did you put your 2 cameras?
So I had one over the agriculture field, trying to hopefully catch him coming to a food source. Um, and then I had another one in the timber, just right outside of a bedding area. So in the cattle pasture, it's a big ridge top, and it's a real thick cedar bedding area.
Okay.
And I assumed that if I was a big deer, that's probably where I would be hiding out in. And so then I had a camera on the backside of that ridge coming out of that cedar thicket.
Okay. All right. So when did you, and I assume this is, did you bow hunt this deer or was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Walk me through that.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time. I actually spent more time bow hunting this deer than I did gun hunting him, just because Ohio is a short season for gun as well. And so the early season, I spent quite a bit of time that first year in there trying to bow hunt him. And I had some stands set up in the woods, not necessarily over the food source, the field, and just trying to catch him coming out of that bed. Because most of the research that I looked into and all the articles that I read is you're probably going to be catching a mature deer coming out of the bed. So as close as I could get to that bed as possible was the best option. But unfortunately, I didn't have any luck the first, obviously, 3 years of hunting this deer. And I've actually only ever laid eyes on him twice out of the 4 years.
So what you're saying is you started hunting this deer when he was 5 years old, basically?
Yeah, yep. He would have been 5 years old, because these sheds were when he was 4.5,
Right.
or 4 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I started hunting this deer at the age of 5.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. So the fifth year, which would have been your first year, did you have any encounters with him?
Not that first year. I did not. I did have some pictures of him.
Okay.
So I set one camera out, and it was of him cruising, and it was actually daylight, but unfortunately I was at work. It was throughout the week, and I think he walked through about 10:30 that morning, and he was just cruising that field edge, and so that was the first picture I had of him, just a couple days after I put that camera out. But yeah, that first year I did not have any encounters with him until the second year. He was in velvet at that time. And I was walking into, I think I was setting a camera up. I was getting ready to put a camera out, and he actually jumped up out of his bed, out of that big cedar thicket ridge. And that was the first time I ever laid eyes on him.
So then you knew, you thought he was bedding there, but that confirmed he was bedding there when he jumped up right in front of you.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So this is year 2. Let's walk through
Correct.
that hunting season.
So I encountered him that first time when he was in velvet, and so I knew he had made it through, especially after having his sheds. So that year I was actually getting married. So
what are you thinking about? What are you thinking about then? You can't get married when you're hunting a big deer.
Right. Yeah. We luckily we got married in September, but trying to get everything planned out with a honeymoon and everything was very limited. So I had limited time to bow hunt this deer up until we were getting ready to leave for our honeymoon. And we actually had a kind of a blizzard come through, and it was negative, probably 20 degrees outside. And my wife and I just got to Florida, and we're sitting poolside, and I get a notification on my trail cam, and it's him at 3:00 in the afternoon, 20 yards from my stand. And he did that the whole week we were in Florida. So
wow,
that was very devastating. So,
I'm not going to say anything about that. I'm just going to leave that alone. So that's, hey,
Yep.
That deer just showed you who the boss was. You're over there on your honeymoon. He's walking right by your deer stand. So
yes, sir. Yes, sir. We got that next week, and I hunted him that entire week and never got any encounters with him. I had a couple pictures throughout the nights of him, but no encounter then throughout that whole hunting season. So
that would be, all right, so that was your second year. Could you see on the pictures how much he had grown from the 5th year to the 6th year, I guess?
He put on a lot of width and then tine length as well. So, I mean, I know at that time, I didn't know how old he was. Actually, I was telling Cody, I got his teeth results back from deer age, and they put him at 7.5. So now I'm just kind of going back in time, how old he actually was when I was first started hunting him. So,
gotcha.
But yeah, he put on a lot of mass, length, and width at that time frame.
I got you. Did as I said, when you moved your tree stand, I mean, what height the tree stand are you hunting this deer?
So I try to get up a little bit. So I'm typically around that 20, 21 foot up.
Okay. All right. And how many different sets of stands have you put in for this particular deer?
I only had 2 sets, just how the woods lays. It's kind of difficult to get back in there. It's about a half a mile walk, and it's a very secluded woods, surrounded by fields. So it's kind of difficult. Just like I said, it's going back to playing that wind to make sure it's not blowing in the bedding or anything like that. So I would have a stand set up north of the bed and then south of the bed, heading into the food plot, or not food plot, but food source. And then north is just coming up out of the woods on a creek bottom. So
I got you. All right. Did you find his sheds that next year?
So I have one shed, and actually I did not find this shed.
Wow.
You can see that there.
Yeah.
So I looked, I normally don't particularly like to go out till the end of February or March, knowing when they fully have dropped, and I didn't want to jump him out if he was still holding them on early. So I was really hoping to find a shed. So I actually walked that whole 80-acre property twice there at the beginning of March, and I never found any of his sheds. And the landowner, my buddy, he was out cultivating one day and actually had that shed wrapped up in the rolling basket. It was laying out in the middle of the field.
Really?
And so how we got that shed off of him there.
That's so cool. All right, we're going to take a quick break here. Hold on right here. Hey, folks, this whole podcast is brought to you by Rack Up, and they've got a new one called the RH2. Check it out right here on our wall right here. But, hey, whether you're finding a shed or it's a deer that you didn't want to mount, that is some cool stuff. And the coolest thing about it is your wife will let you even hang it in your house. That's what I like about it. But, hey, you might have a European mount. You don't like it? Folks at Rack Up got you covered. All right, let's go into this. Is this year 3 now we're going into?
Yep. So year 3, I had 0 encounters with him, and pictures were starting to get a little limited of him as well from that late September time frame all the way through season. And I hunted him hard, just every chance I got to get in there, playing the wind again. And I had 0 encounters of him that whole year. Like I said, the pictures were starting to get a little limited, so I was curious on how his ranges were starting to move around and starting to shift a little bit. So I was starting to get a little worried that he was going to be gone after that year. And I did get a few pictures of him about that late January time frame. Again, their bow season continues through February, but a lot of times if that deer or any deer makes it through the harshness of the winter and the gun season through that late January, hopefully that they're going to make it for a while. So I did get a couple pictures of him that late January, and knowing that he did make it through the season, and then no sheds from that year.
Wow. All right, so let's come on to the main year. What year is it? And, hey, did you bow hunt him? Just let's go through the whole thing and the tree stand, the whole 9 yards.
Yep. So it would be the year 2024 here. And starting to hunting, like I said, I walked through trying to find the sheds, and then we got the one, and then that was it. And then I hung several stands, starting to shift around stands, trying to get as close as I could to his bedding area, but not wanting to push him out or anything. And then there's some oaks around the bed, so he doesn't have to travel very far that early season to get some food sources if he's in there. So after hanging stands, I scouted during the velvet season, trying to lay eyes on him with some binos. Never did see him, seen several really good bucks, up and comers, but he never did show up. And actually, I didn't have a picture of him all year up until December 1st, was the first picture. And it was kind of a bittersweet moment getting that picture, due to I think it was the week or 2 weeks prior to that. There was word that he or a big deer happened to get poached around that area. And so my heart sank when I heard that information. And luckily, I don't think actually any deer got poached. I think it was just a rumor that was going around, and people thought it was this deer. But that December 1st rolled around, and I got my first picture of him that year. And my hopes were higher than what they were for sure. But yeah, it was a bittersweet moment getting that picture, knowing he was still alive, and he actually made it through that first week of Ohio gun season as well, after getting that picture.
I got you. So which weapon now and which season are you in when you get ready to start really getting after him?
Yeah, so like I said, I hunted him all up through that time frame with my bow, and then never had any encounters with him. But then getting up to their second week or their second gun hunt, which is just a 2-day gun hunt, it's just on a weekend. We were leading up to that point there. That week leading into there was a picture of a trail cam picture of him. Going around pretty heavily of him, not one of mine, but he must have went on another farm, and that picture was going around quite a bit. And so now my chances were starting to get a little lower, with all the neighbors, particularly looking for this deer and trying to hunt this deer. And there was actually several other guys around Ohio come to knock on my buddy's door to ask permission to hunt this deer. And luckily enough, he said no, that I was hunting him. But yeah, it was crazy that week leading up to that weekend of harvesting him. And but yeah, we get into that 2-day gun hunt. I went out Saturday morning, and actually didn't see one deer that whole morning. And then the temps were really low.
Codey, you got 2 days to hunt him, but you had to have the right wind to hunt him on those 2 days, or otherwise you couldn't hunt him, right?
Correct. Yep. The wind was the biggest effect to hunt exactly where I wanted to hunt him, just south of that bed there, coming out of the bed. Yes, the wind was a big factor in that, and I was very fortunate enough to get that wind to hunt that spot.
Okay. And then is this a Saturday, Sunday deal? So you hunted him Saturday, is that right?
Yep. Saturday, I went in Saturday morning, and because temps had just dropped, and we actually had a snow that Friday evening. So there's a little bit of snow cover there, and then went in Saturday morning, didn't get an opportunity to see a deer. And then went in that Saturday evening, and I was actually late getting into the stand as my wife and I were doing some late Christmas shopping. So by the time I got there, it was already pushing 4:45, 5 o'clock. So right about that time frame where deer were wanting to get up and move. And so I actually didn't even set in this one of my tree stands. I actually sat on the ground.
Really?
Yep. And it was on the backside of that cedar thicket coming out. There's 2 ridges that come out to a pinch point there. So I sat up on one ridge looking north on another ridge coming out of that back of that cedar thicket, and assuming, if he's going to make any appearance, it would be walking in here, coming right out of bed. And I'm only about 70 yards from a field edge, that hay field, and then the ag field where they meet together. But it's really, really thick in there, so I can't see the field. So I'm sitting there, and I probably wasn't sitting there 10 minutes, and I could hear a deer grunt behind me out in the field. And so I crawl my way up to the fence row there that splits the cattle pasture and then the hay field. And I could see a buck take off with a doe, and he ran that doe right into the woods. And
So how far crawl did you have to make?
About that 70-yard crawl.
Wow.
Yep.
So you left where you were setting up. You heard the buck grunting. You crawled 70 yards to get a look, and hopefully that was him, right?
Yeah. So I didn't know if he was even going to be in the area at all. I was looking I knew I had other mature deer there too. Leading up to this point, I honestly thought he got killed somehow. Mm-hmm. And because the only picture I had of him was December 1st, and then that was it. He left and never got anything back from him. So yeah, I crawled up to the fence there, and then that buck took off with the doe and ran her in the woods. He was one of actually the other mature deer that were on that farm, but unfortunately, I didn't get a shot at him, and I'm kind of glad I didn't. But at this time frame, the sun was just setting, and so I pulled my binos out while I was up on the field edge, and I'm just glassing the field, and I could see right where the sun was setting up there's a little ridge there in the hayfield. I could see a silhouette of a deer, and with that sun right behind him, it was just black, so I couldn't see who it actually was or what deer it was. So I threw my binos up on that deer, and as soon as I did, he raised his head up. So it was like you're living in a dream where the deer's just standing in the sunset, and you see him just standing there. And it was a very beautiful moment to witness that and see that. And my first thought was, it's him. There's no way it's him. And 'cause like I said, I've only ever seen him once in person, and this was the second time I ever seen him in person.
So this is Saturday afternoon of the 2-day gun hunt. And what kind of gun were you using?
350 Legend. Yep, straight wall.
Straight wall. Okay, boy, that straight wall thing's starting to take off across the country. That's cool. All
yes,
right.
sir.
Well, let's get him on the ground. So tell me what happened.
All right. So he's just standing up there in the sunset, and he's all by himself. There's not another deer with him or even out in the field. And he's just feeding out in the he's coming out of the hay field, working his way into the corn. So I was kind of hoping he was going to make his way down to me a little ways, but he couldn't get too far before he would catch my wind. Mm-hmm. At this point, he's probably about 150, 160 up in the field. So I actually dropped my bag, and I crawled up through the fence there. Just along that fence row to try to close a little bit of a distance to him. And I get within, I think he was about 115 or 120. And he still has no idea I'm there. He's just feeding, just looking around. And he's starting to ease out in the middle of the cornfield, which is away from me. And if he does that, then he's pretty much gone. And because there's a kind of a big dip down in there, and that's a little too far of a shot for me. So after I crawled about 40, 50 yards up the fence row, I put my gun up on a rest on the fence post there, and I had him in my crosshairs, and he's, like I said, he's just feeding. He has no idea I'm there. And I go to squeeze the trigger, and I couldn't do it. My adrenaline was pumping, and my heart was just racing, and I just didn't know what to think. So I backed off, and I took a deep breath, and I put the crosshairs back on him again, and go to squeeze the trigger again. I couldn't do it again. I'm shaking so bad. And so at this point, he's starting to ease his way out in the middle of the field a little bit now. And I still have him about that 120, 125 range. And so I finally just looked up, and I said a prayer to the good Lord above. And I put the crosshairs on him, and I just slowly squeezed that trigger, and it thumped him right behind the shoulder. And he actually dropped and got up, and he's just standing there looking around like he had no idea what hit him, what happened. So I was just thinking to myself, well, if he's just standing there, I'm going to try to put another one in him. So I racked another one, and I put it right behind his shoulder and pulled the trigger again, and it thumped him right behind the shoulder again. And he kind of stumbles a little bit more out towards the middle of the field, and he's still looking around, and I'm just thinking, I'm like, man, he hasn't gone down yet with two right behind the shoulder. So I racked my last bullet that I had, and shot him again, and that one kind of hit him a little bit back, like probably right behind the lungs there. And he finally stumbles off into the middle of the field, and right before he gets down into that dip that I mentioned where I can't see him anymore. Mm-hmm. And he's just standing up on the top of that hill, and I'm watching him the whole time through my binos now. And he's just standing there. He's not moving. He's not even trying to stumble or nothing. So,
and you're out of bullets.
And I'm out of bullets.
Barney,
yes,
you Barney Fife me on this one. You ain't got any bullets. Got one.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And as I mentioned earlier, I had to drop my bag back while I was crawling to kind of lighten my load, and I had some extra bullets in there.
Oh.
So I actually crawled back to my bag, and he, like I said, he's just still standing there. No clue what's going on. So I get back to my bag, and I load up again, and so I put it on him again, and I've already got three bullets in him. Wow. And he's still just standing there.
Wow.
So I put another one on him, and at that point I would say he's probably 150, 155 out in the field, and that's a really far poke for me. I've never even shot a deer over 100 yards, so this was the furthest I've ever shot. And I just put it right behind his shoulder, took a deep breath, pulled the trigger, and it thumped him again. So now I got 4 bullets in this deer, and he finally stumbles down into that waterway or ditch, and all I could see is just his antlers. Mm-hmm. So I'm watching him, and he makes it to, there's a little tree line point that he can get to, and he makes it to that point, and all I can see is just his antlers kind of go down like he bedded, mm-hmm. not like he expired or anything like that. And so I pull my binos up, and I'm trying to look in that tree line for him, and I couldn't see anything from that time that I seen his antlers go down. So I assumed he just bedded right there, if he even made it out of that tree line. And so I immediately call my best friend, and he probably can't even understand what I was saying. I know I couldn't. Mm-hmm. And there's plenty of daylight left, but I didn't want to go in there and push him or anything. So I made the choice to call the landowner. I told him that I had shot him, and that I was going to back out, and I was going to give him time because I didn't really see him go down. So, and then I made a phone call to my wife, and I let her know that I had shot him as well. And at that time I backed out. My buddy was going to come over and help me, and we all met at the landowner's house. So they all walked in with me, and we gave him about an hour and a half, I believe. And then, within that time frame, my heart was kind of in my stomach just because I didn't physically see him go down.
Right.
So I didn't know if he was just bedded there, if he was going to get up or anything like that or move. So
was it dark when y'all are going back in with your buddy? Was it dark then?
Yeah, at this time it was dark. Yep. I had when I shot him, I had probably half an hour of daylight left to go look for him, but I just didn't want to push him.
Sure.
Just because, like I said, I didn't see him go down. So I just backed out, gave him about an hour and a half. And at this time it was dark. So we got some headlamps and flashlights, mm-hmm. and got to the woods or the field there. And we started to see some drops of blood, mm-hmm. From where I seen him or where I shot him. There was still a little bit of snow left over on the ground from the night prior. So that kind of helped us guide us in the right direction, and went right down to that little ditch there where I couldn't see him anymore. And there was some really good blood there. And So we get up to the tree line to where I thought I had seen him bed or go down. And I was telling my buddy and the landowner, I told him, I'm like, I think this is about where he's at. And so we kind of eased away from the tree line to get a better view of it, just in case he bedded there or if he got up or anything like that. So we get up there and we're probably about 60 or 70 yards from the tree line. And the landowner, he happened to shine his flashlight just right in the tree line. And I said, there he is. He's laying right there. And I could just see his like G2 and his G3 sticking up. So, so we walked up with him with caution just to make sure he was still not expired there. Mm-hmm. And he was expired. So right where I actually seen him go down is right where he expired right there. And walking up on him, I was speechless, and I still kind of am to this day. Oh, yeah. But yeah, we got up there and I tagged him, and I dropped to my knees, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I actually did cry. So yeah, it's just a bittersweet moment of 4 years just laying right here in front of me of an awesome chase with a mature giant.
Well, think about this: 4 years you hunted him, and you gave him 4 bullets.
Yeah, I did not think about that. Yes, sir.
All right, bring him up and let us see him. You got him?
Yep, I got him right here. So
and you might have to back up some. Back up a little bit. Look at that, folks. Holy smokes.
Yep.
That is, I mean, and we had a Buckmaster scoring him. So what
yes, sir. Scott Beam out of Burkeville, Ohio, he scored him. And he had him at 231 and 5/8.
Wow, 231 and 5/8. Well,
sir.
That is an awesome story. And the two things that I've been doing these things. Your pressure. You didn't put much pressure on him. You knew where he was bedded. And your wind was so critical into making this happen for you.
Yes, sir.
Plus you had your trail cameras, right? Now,
Yep.
I'm going to have to throw your wife under the bus because she got you married and you messed up. He was right under your stand, right? And then you went Christmas shopping and you were late getting to your stand again. Your wife messed you up twice. But, hey, that was the best blessing going Christmas shopping because you got on the ground and you had to belly crawl 60 or 70 yards instead of having coming out of that tree stand, right?
Yes, sir. I'm going to give my wife praise on this one, though, because we've been together for 8 years, so she's been with me the whole time chasing this giant, and just super blessed to have her in my life and just being able to get out. And like I said, we were actually in the middle of moving too while I was trying to hunt this deer. So she's awesome, and I couldn't do it without her. That's for sure.
You can't shoot big deer without a good wife. Okay. It's just that simple. So, but when the moment of truth came to you, and I've said this to a lot of people when they see a big deer, when you go and you see a deer and you say shooter, take your eyes off the rack, because the rack and everything will make you hyperventilate and get you all buck fever and all that. You went through that. And I said, when you do that, take about 3 deep breaths, look away, and then come back and get composed. You had to do it 3 times.
Yes, sir. Yeah, the good Lord was with me for sure. Like I said, I looked up and I said a prayer to him, and I was able to finally connect to him. But it's different once you lay eyes on something like that. But yeah, he's a phenomenal deer, and I'm just very thankful to harvest him.
Well, Cody, if you never shoot another one, you got your World Series ring right there, and I'm sure you'll get some other ones. But that's one heck of a buck, my friend, and I'm proud for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Well, thanks for being on today's podcast. Again, another great buck. Folks, we appreciate you tuning in and watching our podcast. First time in, push the subscribe button. Tell all your buddies to follow us on social media. And remember, if you hadn't got an old rack hub right here, you better get you one. The RH2. Check the link in the description down there, and we'll get you one. All right, thanks for tuning in to the podcast. We'll have another big buck, just like Cody, coming soon.